Welcome to the Law School Admissions Simplified podcast, where we cut through the nonsense to talk about all things LSAT, law school admissions, and life related. I'm Ben, and I do LSAT prep and law school admissions full time. If you like what you hear here, you can find me on Instagram, where I post about admissions at LSA Simplified, or on my website, lsasimplified.com. I've written an LSAT book you can find on Amazon titled LSA Simplified LSAT Primer. I also host free LSAT sessions monthly, as well as paid monthly courses, tutoring, and on-demand options for LSAT preppers. Alrighty, so today we're going through a few things. I have an interview with the current 1L at Syracuse at the hybrid program. So that's exciting. And I will be inserting that after I go through this quick agenda. Real quick, we're going to talk about LSAT addendums. I posted about this on Instagram this past week and got pretty interesting responses. So the first thing I'll do is read out the text of the post that I had, and then we'll break it down. So the post that I had was talking about basically how you should write an LSAT addendum. One of the tricky things about Instagram is you have these really short topics, and it's hard to really put all the information out there. So the text of the post said the issue with trying to explain your low GPA in an addendum is that everyone with a low GPA writes an addendum talking about it. And I continued in a second paragraph. You can do it well, but many fall flat on their face. Make sure to keep it fact-based and not talk about grammar dying. So the sentiment of that post is basically, one, everyone with a low GPA has a reason for it. So whatever reason you give is likely not as powerful as you think it is. Not because it's not true in real life. I have no idea whether you have a legitimate reason for your 2.9 or your 3.2 or whatever low GPA you have. But what I do know is that literally everyone applying with a low GPA is giving reasons. So unless you have very factual arguments for why you have a low GPA and why that does not represent you, you're going to have a hard time. We talked about this in the last episode, but the best way to do it is to talk about numbers. So talking about an upward trajectory. For example, if you had an overall 3.0, but you had a 4.0 in your last 2 years, like your junior, senior year, that's a great fact. Additionally, if I'm trying to think about other good reasons, maybe a higher major GPA, like maybe you were pre-med and you absolutely bombed your science classes, but you did well in your second major, that could be a good fact. But people often start talking about what I view as pretty bad reasons because, one, the law school has to take you at your word, and they're very reluctant to do that. So people will often say like, oh, my grandma died, which I don't know, maybe I should have phrased that differently. But the point is that saying grandma died in your GPA addendum, the law schools don't care. They don't care that grandma died. It's one of those things where it's tough, but so what? And then maybe grandma died and you did tank that semester, and that's like the one semester where you got like a 2.0, and your other 7 you got a 4.0. But what I find is that most people writing about grandma died, it's not that they got a 2.0 in that one semester, but rather they got a 2.0 across all 4 years, and now they're trying to justify it retroactively. So yeah, if you did have one semester or a year that went poorly due to these outside circumstances, you could do it well. I find most people tend to really fuck that up and raise more questions in a document that's actually trying to answer questions about a low GPA. And most of them look like excuses. It's not universal, but if you're talking about these things, unless there's some numbers to back up why this is not representative of you, it's tough. And then I had a few people comment with various questions like, oh, I was in undergrad 10 years ago. I'm a more serious person now. I didn't take school that seriously. And to them, I said, well, get a high LSAT. The best way to convey that you're a more serious person now is to show that the study habits and preparation you lacked in undergrad are now gone. You can do it for the LSAT. And yeah, I mean, that's the best way to do it. There were some other comments. No one got too aggressive this time. Occasionally when I post something like this, I get really negative responses, but I actually kind of consider posts like this to cull the herd in a way, where if I have people that are okay with having a low GPA and a low LSAT and making excuses, I'm probably not the LSAT prep for them anyways. I don't know. I think I'm a nice person. I try to be kind, but I'm also not going to blow smoke up people's asses and be like, no, a 2.9 is totally fine. And yeah, you working 10 hours a week is definitely relevant. And yeah, your 2.9 and 145 is definitely going to end up in a great legal career. I don't know. That's not me. It's one of those things where yes, you can write a GPA addendum, but there were stuff people were saying about, yeah, it's just people write addendums poorly. That's the gist of that. And I just wanted to expand upon that. So if you're looking for a template to write an addendum, You started off with your LSAT GPA. My overall LSAC calculated GPA is blank. Then you say, however, and then whatever thing happened. Ideally, an increase in your GPA. Like I exhibited an upward trajectory, or my GPA in my major was much higher, something like that. And then you say, with this in mind, my GPA would be X. And it's just whatever calculation, disregarding the bad things, whether that's your pre-med courses or your freshman year where you fucked off, but basically a recalculation. Now, that recalculation is very important. If you're just going to complain about, oh, I was pre-med and that's why I have a low GPA, they already knew that. They saw your transcript. Like they saw you had a 2.9, but if you didn't get better and didn't show improvement in other courses, or once you switched out of pre-med, including that doesn't help you. In fact, it's calling attention back to a bad part of your application. So unless you have a very good like GPA addendum and a good reason for it, don't even bother. It's going to hurt you more than it helps. And yeah, it's one of those things where people push back and they do think that their reasons are unique, but this is what someone else in the admission space has called special snowflake syndrome, where everyone thinks they're the exception to the rule. Because yeah, there are good GPA addendums. Most of them are bad. Just like everyone thinks they have a good personal statement, but most of them are bad. And everyone thinks they're the exception. In all likelihood, you're not. But the key, as we talked about, is just keep it numbers based. If you keep it numbers based, there's not much to object to. They can't object to be like, oh, did Ben really have a higher GPA his junior and senior year? If you put it on the page, they can't argue with that. What they can argue with is how much did the loss of Ben's cat Fluffy affect his mental health? Because they might just think that I'm bullshitting and coming up with excuses. And in all transparency, that's what most of these addendums look like. Okay, cool. I also got an email about how to review questions on the LSAT. So we'll do an actual LSAT question on this LSAT podcast. Not that we do that very often, but they wrote, would you be able to go over a methodology for reviewing questions you got incorrect and how to fully grasp and understand them? And yeah, I mean, I have a basic methodology. So the first thing is look to the passage or the game to start off. Most mistakes happen in the setup, whether that's reading an argument, reading a passage, or setting up your game, and they happen less so in the answers. The answers are actually really straightforward if you know what you're looking for. So in all likelihood, you didn't read the argument or passage well enough. It's not that you made a mistake in the questions, but if you did, that's where I would start. So the first thing is look back to that passage and really reckon with, did you understand this? You probably didn't, but spend some time there. Then I have a few other questions I would work my way down. First off, what tempted me about the wrong answer? Why did you pick this wrong answer that's incorrect? There's something wrong about it empirically, and you didn't catch that. So you need to identify that. Additionally, why'd you get rid of the right answer? What led you to getting rid of this correct answer? So, go there. And then you can also ask, did you understand the question? Sometimes people, especially when they're newer to LSAT prep, aren't fully understanding what they're asking. So really make sure you understand what they're asking you. If they're asking you a flaw question and you brought in new information, you can't do that. Additionally, if they're asking you on reading comp a question with the word inferred in it, the LSAT does not mean inferred. They mean, what did the passage say? So maybe you misunderstood the word inferred to be licensed to bring in outside information and kind of fill in the gaps for them, but they're not asking you that. So make sure you're understanding the question. And then also ask, how are you going to avoid these mistakes in the future? Did you go too quick? Did you not understand it? Because whatever's going wrong, you're going to have to figure that out. And that's where the value in review is. So I would expect most of your mistakes to be happening in the question about, did you misunderstand what was happening in the first place? Because on LR, if you've seen what's wrong with the argument, you know what the answer is going to be 90% of the time. On reading comp, if you understood it, you're going to know the answer 100% of the time. And then on games, same thing as reading comp, you're going to know it 100% of the time. So people often think that it's the answers that are giving them trouble. It's not. It's the source material in the first place. You're not understanding the arguments well enough. You're not understanding the passages. And that's where you need to really dive in deep. Like, yeah, I can circle words and answers and point out, like, yeah, you can't use this word over and over again in explanations. But the best way to not even have to worry about that is to understand the passage and the arguments better. And yeah, once you get there, then there is the repetition of just doing question over question to really drill those things in. Because there are like things you pick up on answer choices and how to avoid them and how to pick the right ones. But all that is downstream of understanding in the first place. And most people lack that understanding. And that's why they're struggling. In fact, if you're not scoring at least like 165, I can guarantee you are not understanding the passages, the arguments, and the games as well as you think you are. I certainly wasn't when I was scoring at that point. And I have yet to meet the person that really understands the source material, but struggles with the answers. That person to my understanding, does not really exist. It's usually that they don't understand the source material and they're getting caught in the answers because the LSAT tells you when you picked a wrong answer. It doesn't tell you when you misunderstood the passage. So people have this kind of natural inclination to think they understood it because, you know, there's no red ding that says, oh, you misunderstood. It just says you got this question wrong. So people are like, oh, I missed something in the answer. And that's really not what typically happens. Okay, cool. So with that in mind, I will be going to the interview. Thank you to Mallory for doing this. It's always awesome to talk to her. She's, I think, one of only 2 people I've ever had from Colorado, which is kind of fun because, you know, it's where I'm from. So it's exciting. And then additionally, we just click. I always enjoy talking to her. And then for all of you, I think I did a pretty good job with the interview. That being said, like, this is new territory for me. So I'm figuring out how to, you know, better ask questions. I think I do this unfortunate thing where I will ask the same question twice, but in 2 different ways. So that's, you know, I am aware of that. And I'm going to try to stop doing that going forwards. But for whatever reason, I just have an inclination to do that. I am aware of it. I'm going to try to stop in future interviews. And then additionally, I tried really hard not to ever speak over her or have her speak over me, to have one speaker at a time. That being said, I don't know that we were perfect. So we may have failed. It may not be as polished as the, you know, product that I hope to get to. But I think for her first interview, it's really great. There's a lot of good stuff in there. She talks about her law school experience of being at Syracuse. She's also really busy with kiddos and just other life stuff. She has a broken leg, which she talks about that and how it impacts her 1L semester. And it's a part-time online program, which I know interests a lot of people. So hopefully you find that useful. If you have any questions or things you want on future podcasts, shoot me an email. I'm always happy to go into things. And I need material. I had fewer questions this week, which is good because I was trying to keep things short with it being, you know, an interview week. But if you have things, if you have a personal statement, just send like podcast in the title of your email. I guess subject would be the word. But either way, reach out. I'm happy to go in depth on any of this stuff. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the interview. So, hey everyone, this is Malorie Gage. She did LSAT and admissions with me, mostly LSAT back in 2022. She's now a 1L at Syracuse. So that's exciting. Yeah, Mallory, I guess introduce yourself to everyone and let them know who you are and what you're about.
I'm Mallory. I just finished finals at Syracuse University. I'm doing the JDI program, so it's hybrid. I have 2 little kids. One's 15 months and one is 3.5. And I have a husband who is currently deployed. And yeah, that's about it.
Yeah,
I'm a mountain biker too, like through and through. So yeah, mountain biking is my life. I broke my leg at the beginning of the semester, so there was also that. But yeah.
Okay, so that's got to be quite the start. You're starting law school, your husband's off while you have the kids, and you broke your leg. How was that for the first, like, I guess, few months? Like, how was the adjustment?
I mean, I think it actually worked out because it forced me to slow down. I did not realize how much work law school was going to be. You know, the amount of hours putting in, and I only take 2 classes because I'm doing part-time. But the amount of work I'm doing 30 to 40 hours a week. And so I think the broken leg was kind of like a blessing in hindsight because it forced me to sit down and not want to be outside on my mountain bike. But yeah, law school is a lot. It is definitely a lot more than what I had anticipated.
Yeah, it seems that pretty much everyone I talk to has that reaction. At least 30 to 40 hours, that seems reasonable. You've been able to keep some level of balance though. So yeah, why did you want to be a lawyer? What drove you to attend law school?
So I had a career in healthcare before this, and I kind of just got fed up with it, and I want to go into medical malpractice. So that's kind of my thing. And that's still the goal. I mean, after my first semester, I still want to do med mal, and yeah, I mean, just a career change in my 30s. Ugh.
Nice. And so you said you were taking 2 classes. I know there's like the usual 1L courses, but with it being part-time, you probably have, well, which 2 do you have?
I took civil procedure and torts.
Okay, so I probably shouldn't admit this, but I still don't know what torts are. I just know the word. What's the basic rundown on that?
So torts are it's different than criminal law. So it's anything like your battery, to negligence, to strict liability. Like you've got different things. It's like your civil law, basically.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. And between that and is civil procedure, is that just like how you go through all the like courts and stuff, or am I completely butchering that?
Yeah, it's about you learn about like the Constitution, and how the federal rules of civil procedure are applied into the federal courts. So yeah,
Oh,
you learn about like the balance between federal and state courts, basically.
okay, nice. Yeah. Sounds riveting. I think my first heads up that I shouldn't go to law school is on the reading comp passages. There's always the legal passage, and I just found my eyes glazing over every single time. Whereas I got like interested in the art ones and the science ones. So that was a good sign. But yeah, I know reading is like the big boogeyman of law school. How has that been with law school? Is it reasonable?
I read an entire civil procedure book that was over 1,000 pages. It is a lot. And the material, I mean, like torts was pretty interesting. The cases, I also had like the world's best professor. I loved her. But like civil procedure is pretty boring. And yeah, I mean, if you hate reading, law school may not be your jam, because it is a ton of reading. And I can't imagine taking 4 classes at one time. Like that would be very overwhelming.
Yeah. And yeah, it's so funny because I'll tell people like on the reading comp section, so take it to my world of LSAT, that it's like if you can't do these 18 sentences of relatively interesting topics on like the Aztecs or science, and sure, like some of them are brutal, but like I have to imagine, not that I've looked at these cases, but some of them probably, from the 1800s, I have to imagine you just want to like rip your eyes out.
Yeah, and you're learning a new language basically while having to learn how to apply it. Like I think the first semester is really overwhelming because you just don't know what to expect. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to read cases, and you're never taught any of that. You learn as you go, basically. So yeah, I mean, reading cases from the mid 1800s, it's like, what am I reading?
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess if you have any tips kind of going off of that, if you were like going to give advice to someone going into law school, what like big piece of advice would you give them to help avoid that?
I my big piece of advice would be to go to every office hour with your professor. And then, if you don't understand something, there are resources out there. Like YouTube has a lot of stuff. Quimby is great for learning like those cases that are really hard to read. But I think like leaning on your professor and their TA, you're getting like a good study group is really vital, in the first semester. That way you can just like bounce ideas off of each other. Ask questions. Like, don't be scared to ask questions in class. Like, seriously, that is like, so many people do not talk in class, and it's like, you need to ask questions if you don't understand something, because they're not going to stop and explain something if they don't know that you don't understand it.
Right. And there's so many parallels to that with like what I do with the LSAT, where I'll have like 20 people in class, and 3 months later, I will remember 2 of them because most people just are kind of nameless, faceless in the void, which is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But like out of those 18 people, some of them probably aren't understanding things. And if they're not talking, you just don't even know. Like, well, it made sense to me. No one's saying it doesn't make sense. So like, I guess we're good. And yeah, that's why I remember you, is because like you would, if something didn't make sense, you would let me know and we would figure out what was going on. So that's awesome. And you said getting a study group. You're obviously in the online program with Syracuse. How is that? Do you guys meet over Zoom? What does class look like?
Yeah, it's definitely a little different. I think that's one of the big differences between like my program and a traditional program. I feel like I would enjoy the camaraderie of being in a residential, like setting. But I have a few study groups, and we have like chats through text messages, we meet through Zoom. And it's just more of like to be like, like I'm overwhelmed this week. Like, did you do all the readings? Like, what do you think about this case? And it's more of like just to have like that support, because you're going into this and you feel like really alone. And like for me, you know, I would talk to my husband about stuff, or, you know, my friends, and they'd be like, oh, cool. Like, sounds like you understand it. And it's like, I don't know if I understand it. So I think it's nice to have those people that are in the thick of it with you. So you can kind of just like, you know, complain almost.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, they understand it in a way. I mean, I have a lot of people that sometimes that don't even do LSAT stuff with me, but they'll reach out after taking LSAT because their parents or friends don't understand like the achievement that they just made. And I do. So yeah, that sounds overly positive. I've heard some negative stuff about law school camaraderie, maybe from other schools, maybe where you have the competition. Does it feel overly, I guess, supportive with each other, or is there some
Oh
level?
yeah. I mean, you know, so like my situation's a little different because most of the people in my class are older. The median age is 35, you know, so I think we've got some young people in our class, but I also have a 64-year-old. Like, so it's very supportive. Nobody's like trying, like, I have exchanged outlines with people. They've given me their outlines. Like, it doesn't feel super competitive. Even though like I know at the end of the day it is competitive, right? But it feels more supportive. And I really like that, because even though I am a competitive person, you know, in mountain biking or cycling, whatever, like as far as law school goes, because I did so well on the LSAT and I got a good scholarship, I don't feel like I have to, you know, be a gunner in law school, you know what I mean? Like, I don't need a
Right.
top job to pay back student loans. So that's
Yeah.
nice. That takes the pressure off of me.
Yeah. And that is not a enviable position to be in where you have to be top 5% of your class or whatever the cutoffs
Oh
are.
my gosh, I can't
Um,
even imagine trying to like get an A. I mean, if it happens, cool, but like, you know, I've done the best that I can with what time I have, you know, with my two kids, it's really hard, you know, so I just feel like, you know, you do the best you can. And I think as long as you pass and graduate, like it'll be fine.
yeah, you're qualified to take the bar, and like it all depends on ultimately what you want to do. Because like if you want to go
Right.
work for some giant firm in New York, like yeah, it probably does matter. But
Yeah,
if
I
that was
know
your end
that.
goal, Syracuse might not have been the spot to begin with.
Right.
Not to Syracuse is a perfectly fine law school. Just I find people often go in with eyes wide shut about the
Yeah.
legal job
No,
prospect.
I mean, I think if that was my position, I would have definitely, I mean, it just, yeah, it could have never been my position being with, married to somebody who's active duty, but you know,
Right.
like, if I wanted to get into Harvard, I definitely like would have retaken the LSAT for
Yeah,
sure.
you certainly were capable of more than you got.
Yeah.
Just from my perspective. But also what you got was totally sufficient for the outcomes you needed. So like why bother squeezing out
Right.
more when
Exactly.
there's
Yeah.
you're already bubbling the 75th at every school you're looking at, so like who cares? But yeah, having seen people that like do continue to improve, like I think you would have, if you wanted to, like you could have eventually gotten into like the 170s. I don't see why you. And
Oh
also you
yeah.
were
I mean,
fully
it was,
accepting. So
I think the hardest part about it was I was pregnant
yeah.
while doing it. And you know, just the pregnancy brain is really hard. You know, which sounds like a big excuse, but man, it is really hard.
I
So
mean, yeah, I hear a lot of excuses. I think pregnancy is on the more valid side of excuses. And yeah, you took the August LSAT, and then when did you give birth to your daughter? It was
no,
pretty.
I took June
Oh,
2022.
did you just take June?
I just took June, yeah, and then I had my daughter in August.
Okay, so still though, that's like what,
I had
7?
planned to take the August LSAT. It was a week before I was her due date. So I had like continued studying after the June LSAT because I was like, oh, you know, like I just don't know what I was going to get. And then
Sure.
they released, I don't remember when they released scores. I think it was in July. And I was like, oh, I'm done. Like now I just focused on it. Like we did some admission stuff, you know, like personal
Right.
statement and yeah, and then I was ready to apply the day I applied the day that admissions opened. So like I think they opened at like midnight and I was like on at midnight applying.
Yeah. And it definitely signals like that you're a type A person, you have your stuff together.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of chatter online about how applying later is kind of okay,
No.
which is very self-serving for us in the admissions and LSAT space because it gets people to do stuff right now, which makes us money. And I think people just fail to see that because like when someone says, hey, you can totally apply with the March LSAT, what they're saying is pay for my tutoring now so that you can take the March test and then apply, which
Right.
I mean, I'm not like as hard, like it has to be September 1st, but also like people are saying, here's the schools that take the June LSAT. It's like, how do you sleep at night? That's just so bad to encourage people.
Yeah, I mean, like my personality, I could never, like, I was fine with taking the August LSAT and then applying as soon as scores were released in September. But I wanted my application in, like, I had everything ready, like to go, so that I applied to all the schools that I could. I got into every school that I wanted to get into. And then, I got top scholarship at most of them. So
Yeah,
I mean,
and kind of going off of that, how quickly did you start hearing back from schools after applying in September?
some schools were a couple of months in, like, after applying, and then, then some other, it was like 5 or 6 months later. Like it just varied from school to school.
Yeah, I guess the point there is even still, even if it was like 2 to 3 months, you're still hearing back before people in the current cycle have like even applied. So like
Oh yeah,
we're getting
yeah,
offers before others have even applied, which
right.
those that say, oh, the deadline's in March, why does it matter if you apply early? It's because the seats and the scholarship money is already getting doled out. Like
Exactly,
and
exactly. Yeah,
it's finite. They don't have unlimited. So
right.
um, yeah, I mean, you really only see the apply later from three groups, which are LSAT tutors who want more LSAT business, admissions consultants who want more admissions business, and the law schools who want more applications. You never really
Exactly.
see it from like, I'd say like objective parties that are like, no, this is actually a good outcome because it's not. But
I would
um,
apply immediately. Like that's just my personal advice. And that was one of my good friends is currently in Wisconsin, and she had taken the LSAT the year before me. She had done everything like a good year before me. And she was like, take your LSAT, study, give yourself time, and then apply the moment that they open. Like
right.
just get in and get it done. And, like that's where all the money's at. Like get all your stuff done so that you're ready to go. And yeah, I mean that I I really think that helped me a ton, and yeah, I don't regret any of the way I did like my LSAT. Well, I mean, I wish I wasn't pregnant. I think I would have done
Sure. Yeah.
better. But I can't really help that. So yeah, I mean, I think like, working with you for as long as I did, and we met quite a bit.
Yeah. But even then, as far as like an LSAT timeline, it wasn't all that long. Because I think you did April, which is the first time that I kind of booted my LSAT class through June. And it's so different now. Like, it's pretty, I think you'd be amazed like how different class looks just because, you do it for 2 years, you make changes.
Yeah.
But I think all for the better for the most part. Um, the only thing I do differently, the big thing is I do answer polls now instead of people DMing me their answers, which
Oh,
the
cool.
bump
Yeah.
there is I don't know how every person is doing. But I was getting really bad engagement for a while. I had a group of goofballs in my actually right after you finished in August of 2022 that like made me almost quit LSAT because like they were just so atrocious and bad. I had like 20 kids, and by the end of class there'd be 4 left. It's like I get it if you have like a doctor's appointment or something. But like, do all of you have to take off every class early? Like it was just
Yeah.
like 1,000 cuts to my heart. But
But, I mean, you can only do so much, right? Like it's on, like it was on me to like do the work. I met with you. I did the classes every Tuesday and Thursday, but then I also did private tutoring with you. I put in the work. I mean, granted, my score wasn't anything exciting, right? But like for what I needed, it was above the 75th percentile for every school I applied to. And like I put in the work, I put in the
right.
time to do it. And that's what it takes. So I mean, like, to what you're saying, like you can only do so much, right? Like
Yeah, and I've gotten to the point where like every month now I do have someone that goes up like 20 points. So it's like, okay, it's something is clearly working. So
right.
for the people that, and that being said, I only had one negative, like I'd say experience with someone, and that was in July of 2022, so like right after you finished. But beyond that, it's mean, I do a really generous refund policy. Well, kind of generous, where like if you come to the first week of class and you hate it, I'll just refund you. Like I don't
Right.
care. But also like when people reach out like 2 months later and they're like, hey, like, can I have my money back? I'm like, no, like,
Right.
tough. You've had access to this for 3 months and you didn't show up. So like you're bad. But yeah, so I guess with the LSAT, I know I met you in like April through June. How long had you been studying before that?
I want to say seriously, probably since February, maybe January. I wanted to give myself adequate time to like, like some people are like, oh, well, all you need is 3 months. And I think that that's not true. I think you
Yeah.
need longer than that. So yeah, I had met with a couple of other tutors who I did not really click with. And that's when I came to you, and me and you clicked immediately. So I was like, this is my dude. Like, that's why I just stayed with you until I took the LSAT. And then we did admission stuff after, So yeah, our personalities clicked really well. And that's, one part of it, but like also how you taught was very straightforward, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
So,
And I think I mean, it's funny because like that was relatively at the start of my LSAT stuff. I've done so much since, and I think I've gotten a lot better at communicating things, but I just pulled up your customer profile on my website. The amount you spent just to put it in like the math for one of the other tutors that you met with, it would have gotten you a little over 2 hours at his prices for the whole amount. So
oh my
my whole
God,
business
it was
model is like,
ridiculous. Yeah, and that's the other thing is that like it's so your prices were more affordable for me,
yeah, and
which
I don't
helped.
try to like be like budget LSAT prep. That's not like the goal. But what I do try to
Right.
do is reach more people at lower prices. So instead of getting like 10 kids on the hook for 10K a year, which is legitimately the business model of some tutors, they just find the rich kids and try to milk them for all they're worth. I just
Right.
try to reach as many people as possible through my monthly courses because it's kind of scalable. And now I have a little bit more on-demand stuff, which is expanding. And then with that, you don't have to skin people for their
Right.
crap. You can do it at much more reasonable prices.
Well, and I don't think people realize how expensive like the admissions part of it is as well.
Right, just
Like
applying is like,
just applying is like, it's a fortune. And I don't think people realize that. Yeah, I don't know. It's like the whole thing is just kind of ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, your prices were definitely way more affordable than anybody else I had like studied with or tutored with. And I mean, that's definitely one factor of it, like the equation. But yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous how much people are charging for LSAT tutoring.
yeah, and I kind of get it because I personally don't do a lot of tutoring anymore. I find tutoring to actually be kind of annoying because the hour that you get paid for is really not all there is to it. There's the communicating with someone, arranging a time, getting ready. All like it kind of also breaks up your day when you have an hour meeting. It's not just an
Right.
hour. So I get why people charge a lot, and I think I charge 200 an hour now, partly just because I don't want to do it. And like if you're willing to pay it, I'm happy to. But I really do steer people towards my courses. I think it's a much better value. And then also like it's more convenient for me on top of that, which is like,
Oh yeah, the courses were great. I think I did that for 3 months or
yeah,
2 months at least. Yeah, I did the courses with you every Tuesday and Thursday. I think if somebody's going to sign up for the courses, they need to make the time to go to the courses, right? Like, because I think that's
yeah,
part of it. Like just signing up is not going to get you an LSAT score that you want. But like, yeah, I mean, I made the time to go, and I usually had a kid with me. So it wasn't ideal, but you know what, it worked. And yeah, I mean, I'm really happy with how my whole journey went, as far as like LSAT and admissions, with you. Because you edited like my personal statement, like we did personal statement stuff.
yeah.
We did a bunch of stuff for admissions too, I
Yeah, I'm
think.
pulling it up. I still have it in my Google Drive. Because we had a folder where we were, I know it wasn't like final,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Cause I had to have like a few different statements of like why I wanted to do online and like all these different things. But
sure.
and then I had like what are they called for like my GPA, I
Yeah,
think.
your addendum. I'm just looking at that right now.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's kind of funny because And I'm doing that again. This year I have a lot more people I'm working with. I mean, just the nature of things. You have a
Right.
wider audience, you work with more folks, but yeah, your stuff. I mean, what's good about you is some people really resist some stuff, which I mean, there's always like I always do things in suggestion mode, so people can take what they like, leave what they don't, because occasionally you have editorial differences, and that's fine. But some people just pick bad topics and like get married to them, and it's like you're gonna like, for example, last year, and I hope this person's not listening. I know she's in law school, so it's not like personal, but she wrote about how her house burned down as her topic, but that was like mic drop. Like there was no like, and here's how I like helped my family recover, or how I went through the insurance process. Just my house burned down. I'm like, that sucks. That's horrible. But like,
Yeah.
are you going to be a lawyer based on that? Is that a sufficient condition for being a lawyer? I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
I think, like we
pretty
had
good
talked
student.
about it because being older, it's kind of like, like, what do I talk about? Because I feel like, I think we had talked about maybe like just doing like some positive stuff from my career. And yeah, I can't even honestly remember what my personal statement was like, but it worked.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously, like I got a
yeah.
nice fat scholarship and I'm super happy. So
And also, I guess to play devil's advocate, I guess it is always theoretically possible you got in despite your personal statement, where they're like, wow, Mallory's personal statement sucked. But I don't think that's the case at all. I just occasionally see people like, I wrote about so-and-so in my personal statement and I got in, therefore that must be the reason. I'm like, well, not well, what was your LSAT? What was your GPA?
yeah, I mean, I think the scores, like your LSAT and your GPA, are definitely like 95% of it, right? And then like
Okay,
the other
so
stuff, the little stuff is gonna help. Like they'll be like, oh, oh, this is really cool. Maybe they'll, like, but like, is their LSAT there, right? Because they're not gonna take somebody who's below the 25th just because they had like this awesome personal statement. You know
yeah,
what
and
I mean?
I mean, they might like, let's say there's a school admitting 1,000 people, they might reserve 10 spots for those people,
Right.
but that's 1% of the admitted class. Basically, everyone else is getting in on their numbers, and it's one of those things where I think people tell it true. Like, there's one person who actually lives by me, which is kind of funny. Like, I like drive by his house when I like go into Boulder, but he talks about admissions and he's really always emphasizing all that stuff, and it's like, dude, like I get that that's your business model, but also remember 99% of people are getting in based on their numbers and then like
Yeah.
a check of their personal statement to make sure they're not a psycho. It's not,
Right.
oh, this person like really affected me. And as someone who reads a lot of personal statements, everyone thinks they have a really good one. Most people don't. They all kind of read the same. Well, not, they don't all read the same, but they tend to kind of fall along the same lines. And everyone thinks, oh, mine's transformative, it'll carry. And if that's you, like probably not. You might be the exception, but most people tend to overestimate the quality of their statement. So yeah, with your law school decisions, you ended up at Syracuse. Was that a close decision, or was it the most obviously correct school for you?
So I remember back in 2019, maybe 2018, I was my in-laws live up in upstate New York, and we were watching TV and it made the news that Syracuse had started a JDI program, that it was going to be a hybrid. And I was like, oh, that's where I'm going to go. Like immediately I told my husband, I told all my in-laws, and I was like, this is where I'm going to go. And I went into my LSAT journey with needing a score above Syracuse's, because that's where I wanted to go. And whenever I was applying to other schools, and I applied probably to 11. I applied to every single hybrid school. And then I also applied to like a few in like non-hybrid ones just to like have negotiations, I don't know. I applied to probably 15 schools. And yeah, I got my acceptance to Syracuse, and it was the highest scholarship. And I was torn between Syracuse and Northeastern, because Northeastern
Okay,
has a hybrid program as well. And they don't do grades, basically.
which is like
They're
that's kind of nice in a way though. Like you don't have to
it is,
stress.
yeah, yeah. And so I actually talked to somebody from Northeastern who was doing their hybrid program, and I was like, hey, this is my dilemma. Like they kind of align with my personal views, my morals, right? Like they have classes that I want to do that are for health law, everything. And he was like, honestly, if you got a fat scholarship from Syracuse, go to Syracuse. Like it's not going to make a difference. And so that like made my decision of like this is where I'm going to go. And then I negotiated my scholarship, so I got a little bit more. But you can only get the thing about hybrid programs is you're capped at scholarship. So they do not ever give 100% scholarship.
Right.
That is something that people need to know. And I think going into it, it's kind of disheartening because, you know, like we've worked really hard to get here and we can't get a full scholarship, but I got most of my school covered. And then whatever else I didn't get covered, my husband gave me GI Bill for. So
Nice.
I will have 0 student loans coming out of law school, which is like the greatest feeling in the entire world. Like I cannot tell you, like the thought of having $250,000 in loans like gives me the biggest anxiety. So to know that I'm not
So
going to have
bad.
any student loans, like if I can do whatever job I want, it doesn't matter how much money I make, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And just the pressure of having that. I mean, and it is fine, I think, if you know for sure you're going to go into big law, but I also don't know how kids can know that. Like, how can you know that you want to be a big law lawyer? You've never done it. Half of the
Yeah.
people even get there quit within 3 years, and those are people that all thought they were going to stick with it and make partner at some firm, and half of them quit within 3 years. So it's just, I think it's such a bad idea to plan on paying off these loans. And like, yeah, if you have to take out 10, 20K, like that's one thing, but
Right.
when we're talking 6 figures, it's just
I
so
know,
crazy.
like, and so many people are comfortable with that, you know, and it's like, I, you know, like I don't know how applicable the LSAT is to like law school, but if it gets me free money, like I'm going to work my ass off to get that free money, you know, so that
Sure.
everything that I make, like I don't feel pressured to do something after, you know, like if I want to go to a small firm or if I want to do nonprofit stuff, like I have the option and I don't have that like doom, you know, over my head of like, okay, well,
Yeah.
you've got now 2 mortgages with, you know, student loans, basically, because that's what it's
Yeah.
going to be with interest and everything. Repaying that is, you know, $1,000 to $2,000 a month
Yeah,
extra.
and arguably it's so much worse than a real mortgage because it's at 7%. You can never
Yes.
refinance.
Yes.
Um, along with that, you also don't have an asset. You can't like default on it and just like say, okay, repossess the
It
house.
never go like you can never get out of student loans.
Yeah.
Like, and I think it's like, you know, I'm just going to blame it on my age, but like, I don't think kids, you know, that are 22, 23, I don't think they understand that, you know, and it's like, oh, I'll just take on $250,000 in debt, but it's like, you will be paying that off for the rest of your life.
Right. I mean, personally, I think back to when I was a sophomore in college. I had been pre-med my first year and did poorly. My GPA was like 3.3 or something, which like I guess for the average college student probably isn't that bad, but like for someone that had like aspirations in terms of like graduate school, it's not a good position to be in. And I was like, I just need to get my grades up so I can just get into like CU law school and pay. And in hindsight, if I'd gone to CU law school and paid, that would have been a terrible, terrible decision. Like it just would have ended so
Yeah.
horrible. Well, in all likelihood, there are the 5 people that graduate that end up getting great jobs and paying their debt off right away. But it's the minority, and everyone thinks it's going to be them. Or there's this whole disillusion, I think, or misunderstanding of how much lawyers actually make. Like it's still lawyers and doctors, and
I know.
the fact that lawyers and doctors are set in the same like clause, just to me, it doesn't
No.
happen. It's
Lawyers don't make anything unless you go into big law. And yeah, I mean, I think you're looking at like starting out at around 60, you know, depending on which state you're in, right? Like different states start out higher depending on cost of living or whatever. But like most lawyers do not make that much money.
yeah, and if you're debt free, 60K, you can have a good living.
Right.
If you're 200,000 in debt, you're just drowning for eternity, and you will never
Right.
escape. Which
Exactly.
it's night and day. I was looking at the Syracuse 509, which for those of you that don't know, a 509 report is basically a disclosure that all the schools have to do with their incoming class data. And what I noticed is they don't even have a part-time program listed on their 509. So they messed up. They have broken their 509. But then, and this is also last year's because 509s are a year delayed due to the way that the law schools release them. But yeah, it looks like at Syracuse, about 41% get half to full, which then there's the breakdown of what is that? Is that like right over half or is it just under full? Because that can break down a lot of different ways. You don't have to share your scholarship, but How was the
I have
process?
70% scholarship.
Okay, that's
So I think the
solid.
max you can get at Syracuse for the JDI program is maybe 60 or 70%, maybe 80. I don't know.
Yeah.
I negotiated once. And yeah, I mean, so that left me, I did the math, that left me with about $50,000 in debt after
Okay,
having
nice.
70%.
And that's
So
like having killed the admissions process and done everything right.
yeah,
So
I mean, that's doing everything right. Now if I had gone to like if I had done regular residential program, I probably would have gotten 100%. But because they don't do that for the hybrid program, it is what it is, right? And like I don't have any other choice to go because we move
yeah,
every couple of years. So like I just knew I was gonna have some debt. But my husband came in on his white horse and was like, here's some GI Bill, take it and use it so we don't have any debt. And then because I mean, my kids are so little, if they want to go to college, I can use all of my income to put into a college fund for my kids because I will not have any debt.
right. And knowing
So
you, not to say that you wouldn't, give them all the opportunities in the world, but I have to imagine you'll also help them go through the college process, like
yeah,
eyes wide open. I think doing law school admissions or even just going through the process, you realize how you can do it right and how you can do it wrong. So I look
yeah,
back at my undergrad admissions process and I mean, for one, I sold myself short. I get into every school I applied to, which I think is like a sign that like I probably didn't push high enough.
yeah,
And then additionally, I didn't negotiate a scholarship or anything. I didn't even really consider the finances. I was just like, what school has the coolest campus for the next 4-year vacation? I'm
right.
gonna go on, which I guess is like a very grow up in like Boulder, Colorado way of viewing college, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
So, and I was fortunate. I had parents that paid for most of college, so I didn't have to like worry about that, which helps.
Yeah,
Um,
that definitely does help.
yeah, definitely takes the pressure off. I was able to graduate debt free, which is huge, just for being able to do risky things. Like, I mean, I think like I'm really fortunate. I think if I were like a more average person that I put myself through college, I might then have to say, okay, I'm not going to do LSAT and admissions. I'm going to try to just go to like a really good law school, which I could have, but then I would have ended up in a career I hated, and that
Right.
would have been a bummer. Which, yeah, I mean, for those of you that are listening and think law might not be for you, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe you should factor. And if not, like that's good too. But it always is worth considering. Is this the field that you really want to do?
Well, and then if you don't know and you have $250,000 in debt, then you're stuck. Whereas if you have no debt and you're like, oh, I really don't like this career, then it's like, okay, what can I do next? Because I don't have all that debt, right? Like, so
Yeah,
just getting as much scholarship as you can is vital, I feel like. I
yeah.
mean,
I mean, I totally agree. And just the freedom of like knowing that when you graduate, if you don't want to practice law, you don't have to.
exactly.
That's awesome to know like this. I'm not locked in. So I am curious about some other JDI stuff. Do they have extracurriculars for you guys? Like I know law school has moot court, lottery, all that good stuff. Are you guys involved? I know you're a 1L obviously, but how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, you can do everything basically that the regular kids get. They do Zoom for everything. I'm a part of a woman's law association at my school. And we, everything is Zoom, and the residential students, they all meet in a room. And so like I'm disconnected by that, like I can't be in the physical room with them, but everything is very involving. And yeah, I mean, like my tutor, well, she's like a TA basically. She's on law review, and she's JDI. Like it's
Nice.
very, very inclusive. The only thing that they don't do is offer some classes to JDI, like the 3L classes where we get to pick what we want to take. Some of those classes are not offered. And so that's kind of a bummer. But I mean, pretty much everything else is really inclusive. And I'm really happy at Syracuse. So
Yeah, and if I had to guess, I'm guessing it's just some dinosaur professor that doesn't want to set up like the Zoom camera.
I'm sure.
Um,
I'm sure it's
so
something that's really stupid, but that's fine.
yeah, but it's a pretty small sacrifice for, the freedom of being able to do it from wherever you have to be and
Right.
managing your personal life. So, I mean, I guess with the other schools, because I know you were looking at several of the other online / remote hybrid programs, you had to go to campus a lot more than Syracuse if you went, right? Is
Yeah,
that
so I actually applied, like one of the schools, Santa Clara University. I got 100% scholarship there, and it was like non-conditional. It was just like amazing. But I had to go once a month to the
Jeez.
campus. And for somebody that lives in the Bay Area, that would be phenomenal.
Or
Like,
even like California, you could probably make it work.
yeah, even California. But for me, with two little kids, and like now I'm going to be in Florida, like we're moving to Florida next week.
Right.
Like it just did not make sense with the cost of a flight and hotel for the weekend once a month. I did the math, and it was actually going to cost about the same as tuition.
Sure. Yeah.
And so it just did not make sense to do that. But yeah, like I think Dayton, you have to go a couple times a semester. Northeastern was similar to Syracuse, where you go like once a semester. St. Mary's was also more frequent, which St. Mary's is just so low ranked, and their scholarship was ridiculous, and it was conditional. And Seattle
Yeah.
also, you had to go, I think, once or twice a semester. But their scholarships are conditional. And I am so glad I did not do a conditional scholarship. I think that's one thing where it was like, everyone was like, oh, you're so smart, you'll do great, you don't have to worry about conditional scholarship. And it's like, now that I'm done with 1L, or well, my first semester, I'm like, I can't imagine that pressure of like being above a certain GPA. Like that would be awful. So I'm glad I did not do
Right.
conditional.
Yeah. And it's just, I mean, having not gone to law school, like I was good at school. I got like, once I figured out school, I got a 4.0 pretty easily every semester without much effort. So like, I think I would do well in law school, but I just can't know. Like, I've never done it. So like, how can you even have an idea of?
It's something that like is not like anything else that you've ever
Right.
done. It's nothing like undergrad. Like I feel like you can kind of, skirt by an undergrad and like do fine. Law school, like if you do not do the readings and you do not participate, you're screwed. It is really hard. And to some people it may be easy, like who are
Sure.
naturally smart, and great for them, but I am not one of those people. And yeah, I mean, it is really hard, and everything weighs on that final exam. Like you get one grade and that's it. So it's like pretty cutthroat.
Yeah. And I have to say, from talking to a few people, I think your mental health seems to be doing pretty well and for being in law school. Some people seem to not be doing so high that I've talked to. And I think a lot of that is they've put themselves in positions where they have to perform. And if they don't perform, their whole life kind of falls apart.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's just how I mean, I would be stressed too. Like I think they're reasonably stressed out. They've put themselves in that position. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, it is definitely stressful. I feel like me having two little kids and my husband being gone has been really hard. Luckily, I have great friends, and my family's here in Colorado, and so they've helped me. Like I would not have been able to do this without certain people in my life. But I've also done the work since week one. I've done all of the readings, I've done all of the briefings, I've participated in class, I have gone to office hours every single week, I have set up meetings with TAs every single week. So for finals, yeah, it was super stressful. But like, I don't know, I felt pretty good going into it. And, hopefully it gets me a passing grade. Like that's all I really care about.
well, I'm sure you'll pass knowing you, but I just think that having that pressure off is so huge compared to where you
It
could be.
is, it is. And then like, as far as like, I think just knowing that if I'm not at the top of my class, like I will still be okay because I don't have any debt.
Yeah, it's just I think it has to be night and day. I'm trying to even like put myself in the mental headspace of someone where I have to be top 20% of my class or my whole future plan falls apart. And I just don't even, yeah, it's impossible to even like think about, but I
It'd
do
be
not.
terrible. it would be awful. Like, I can't imagine. I mean, I think I could do it if I had to, but I just, I don't want to be that person. You know what I mean? Like, I want to enjoy it. Right. And that
Yeah.
could be just like having a different life experience, but like, I really enjoyed my first semester. It was hard, but like, it was, my classmates are all super fucking smart. Oh, sorry. I
No, you're
cussed.
good. You can swear. I hit the explicit tag on the podcast, so
I'm
we're good.
sorry.
But
But yeah,
you're
like they all come from different backgrounds. I've got doctors in my class. I've got people with multiple masters. Like, everybody's coming from a different background, and it's really nice to just be able to relax and like learn about these people and like not feel like I have to be the top, you know, 1% of my class, because
yeah.
I don't have to
And
have
I'm
a
interested.
job.
I'm meeting with three other people. There were four of you that I sent that email to. And everyone responded, which is awesome for all of you. But everyone has like good scholarships. Like maybe I should reach out to someone who I know isn't on scholarship to see like how they're feeling, see like what the
Yeah.
stress is like. Because if that's you, like shoot me an email. I'm very curious to hear what the mental state is like if you're under all that pressure, because I have to imagine it's a little brutal. But yeah, I guess another question. Have you changed your perspective on lawyers since being in law school? Have you like had any changes on that?
Um, I Not really. I mean, and granted, I don't know a lot of lawyers, and I don't like, I, yeah, I don't know. That's a hard question. I don't think so. I
Yeah, if you don't
mean,
have a good answer, you can always punt on it too, because it is kind of open-ended.
yeah,
Um,
I mean, I think like lawyers are the way that they are because of, like, you're only going to be a lawyer if you're like a certain type of person, because I think it
right.
takes a certain type of person to do what a lawyer does, and like, it's like that type A, like me, like crazy
Yeah.
type A, like lists, right? Like, we write out lists. We have like, if you're super unorganized, and like, I just don't know how people do in law school with like being super unorganized and, you know, like not having their crap together, because you
Right.
have to have it together to get through.
Well, this is where I think earlier you said you weren't sure how relevant the LSAT is. The content, I don't know if it's all that relevant. I think some parts are like reading carefully, that sort of thing. Being able to spot a sufficient assumption, maybe not as important, but like, but what I do think is important is seeing like, can you figure something out and like get through this? Because
Right.
like I worry about the people that don't figure it out. And I see them where it's like they can't. I mean, you remember my homework schedule, it was pretty low key. I would be like, hey, do a section a day, review it. It's gonna take you like an hour.
Yeah.
And the minority of people would do that. And it's like, guys, it's an hour. Like you have to get this done. But
Yeah. If
people
you can't
wouldn't.
dedicate the time to studying the LSAT and think it's so hard and so like tough, law school is not going to be your friend. I will just say that, because I've seen I've seen people saying online that the LSAT is harder than law school. And like, I don't
Right.
know who these people
It
are.
universally comes from people I think that aren't in law school that have like just done the
I
LSAT.
think or they'll be like, oh, I heard I have a 1L friend. And I'm like, shit, I wish I was back to studying the LSAT. It's so much easier. I I carry my books everywhere. Like, if there's a moment where I can read, I'm going to read. And so it's like, I don't know. I just feel like law school is significantly harder. Like, they're like apples and oranges, basically. That's how
Yeah.
I feel about it.
And I'm willing to believe that because I think about like what you need to succeed on the LSAT, maybe 6 months with like an hour to two a day and just
Yeah.
showing up every day. That's the
Yeah.
big, a lot of people, they take a lot of days off and that really hurts them. But like if you study an hour to two a day for all your law school classes, I have to imagine you're pretty quickly failing and just
Oh,
having
yeah.
class.
It's way more time than that. It's especially 1L year, because you're still just figuring out how to do things, right? Like,
Right.
we're all just figuring out how this works. Like, no one knows what an outline is. So it's like, we're all figuring all these things out. I'm definitely learned a lot about myself and what I need to do for next semester to be more successful. So I'm not feeling so confused, that I will apply to next semester, and I'm hoping it goes better, but like it's apples and oranges. Like the LSAT, I think that some of the stuff on there is probably relevant, like you said, with like, slow reading, making sure you're digesting what you're reading. Because if you're just reading and not understanding what you're reading, that there's a big problem there, and you will not do well in law school.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things the LSAT assesses. And there are like little, I'd say, nitpicky things that you really just learn for the LSAT. Like, don't infer when they say infer. It's such a stupid LSAT trick, but like it is real.
Yeah.
But that doesn't meaningfully help you in the future. But yeah, as far as being organized, reading carefully, that stuff I think applies pretty well. But yeah, where was I gonna go next? I had another question, but I've lost it. So yeah, I guess how has your life been other than law school? Like, how was the past semester with, still two young kids, your husband's gone, and adjusting to the new? Like, are you able to still make time for your mountain biking and just general recreation?
Well, I just started walking again, because I had broken my leg. I shattered my ankle right
Oh,
before,
geez.
not fun. So there's been a lot of hurdles for me just with like not being able to work out, and like that's a big part of like who I am. I mean, you can see my bike, my Peloton on the back, like riding is such a huge part of my life. But I think I really enjoy law school. So it's been fine because I like learning the stuff. I like reading, and it's so different than anything I've ever done. And I was an English major, so I know how to read and like apply stuff, but it's so different from that, and yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed it so far, I mean, but I also had great teachers. I had one great teacher. The other one I didn't really care for, but
Yeah. Well, 1 for 2, that's a 50%. So, it could be worse. But you think back to education, most of them aren't great. So to even have one right off the bat is pretty awesome.
I mean, and I plan to take every class that she offers because she's so good. Like, she's phenomenal and she really cares. But it's just, it's such a learning curve, right? Like, it's so steep too. You get like 12 weeks to like learn the material and apply it, because that's what the final test is like applying everything that you've learned. And it's typing as fast as you can, basically,
Yeah.
and then your entire grade is that final. So
Yeah, I actually heard that a long time ago, and it's been like deep in my brain since then. I hadn't thought about it, but if you're a bad typer, is that going to set you back in law school? Like, will that?
Oh yeah, I would imagine so. I mean, like, I had 3 hours for my torts final, and I'm pretty fast at typing, and I could have used another half hour to really get more on the paper. Like, I probably, 12,000 words for that final. And it's a lot. And it's like,
you're just like typing nonstop then, I guess. Like, just,
I mean, you're just like, like there was a few multiple choice questions that she threw in there. But it's a lot. It's like, you're thinking on the fly, like what applies, what doesn't apply, but then you have to like go into a deep analysis, right? Like, it's not just saying, hey, this applies. Why does it apply? Like, tell me the law, and why does the law apply here? And what courts will do what, right? Because every state court is a little different. Different states do different things. So you've got to know all of that and memorize it, because most things are closed note, closed book. So yeah.
Well, it sounds like a lot. I have to imagine those 3 hours are just like quite the whirlwind of like being, I guess if you're engaged in it, it probably feels like you kind of get into a flow state, or at least I hope you would, because otherwise I have to imagine it doesn't go too well. But how did you feel coming out of them? Did they feel like you did a good job?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like I definitely passed. I don't know if I got a top grade, but I'm okay with that. I felt good coming out of it. I think, like thinking back, oh, I probably could have done this different, and I probably could have gone, like flushed this out more. But I mean, I felt good. Like I've got 2 solid outlines, and I tried to remember as much stuff as possible, and hopefully it like works in my favor.
Yeah, I think that's kind of, well, I mean, I have no clue, but it sounds like that's all you can do. It's just like going as best as possible and
Yeah.
do that. Do you know what 2 courses you're well, I'm sure you do, but what 2 classes are you taking in the spring?
So I am taking contracts and LCR1, so like a legal writing course.
Oh yeah, well, hopefully, I mean, I think you would be well prepared for that, considering you're probably a little bit more legally sharp in your writing than the average person might
Yeah,
be.
I have no idea what to expect with the legal writing class, because it's not like a typical class where you're like doing cases and briefing and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
and I think like there's no final. I think you just have like a final paper. So,
Yeah, I mean, if you're good at that, that's awesome though. And that being said, I have no idea how legal writing translates to just general writing, but I have to imagine not being fluffy and verbose
oh
is
yeah.
probably still a good skill.
There's nothing fluffy about law school. Um, which I think like, like you were talking like personal statements, like a lot of people are fluffy on their personal statements. And fluff gets you nowhere in the
Yeah.
law world.
For what it's worth, for those of you that are listening, pretty much everyone's personal statement is bad. So it's not that much of a reflection on you. And most people submit them as is. So like the average personal statement is pretty trash. You can fix them, you can get help. I have a whole video of me editing like 4 or 5 on YouTube, because I can do that without getting LSAT copyright striked. So that's fun. And I just asked for 4 random ones, and all 4 were like really bad. So it's a good sampling of showing like what the average personal statement happens to look like. But the sad thing about all of them is like all of them had really good stuff that like could be pivoted into like good statement. Just the way they were presented was pretty bad. All right, well, I just have one final kind of off topic question, but it's a personal curiosity. I was watching back one of our old recordings from like April or May. This was a while ago. But did you have a Whoop? Was that something that you had, or am I like hallucinating? Okay, yeah. So I became a Whoop person about a year ago, and it has completely transformed my life. Are you still doing it, or have you moved on?
I do not, because my kids don't sleep. So I used it. I liked it, but I was always in the red.
Yeah, I
Because
have to imagine.
I did not get any sleep. And so it was kind of like, this is a waste of my money. But I think Whoop is great, man. It gives you so much like information into like your body if you're not aware of your body, especially as like an athlete, like knowing, today like maybe not your best day, and the Whoop will let you know that pretty much.
Yeah, it's confirmation of like, are you actually recovered, or well, because like sometimes you just feel a little slow, but if you're looking at it says you're like 84% recovered, it's like, okay, maybe I'm just like the problem and I'm actually good to go. Because I think it's been great for me, because I was a like 5-6 day a week. I would just lift, and like I guess it's good for like getting bigger, but as far as like overall health, maybe not the best. But now I like do a pretty even split between cardio and lifting, which I think like my health has gotten so much better with it, which, as with all things, it's just data. Like if you don't do anything with it, it's useless.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like a lot of my friends have it. And, I think it's informative for especially women, with like your menstrual cycle, because you go through different stages of the menstrual cycle. And I think it kind of like can let you know when you're in different phases of the menstrual cycle, and how you will perform in those stages. And like it was nice for me after I had my kids, because I've been nursing for 3 years straight. It's torture. But yeah, I mean, like it accounts for like lactation and pregnancy and like all these different things. So it definitely gives you a lot of information. If you're a data junkie, like the Whoop is phenomenal.
And I just have to ask, because like I don't know anyone with it. I'm like the only person, or I know like one guy, but like I see him like occasionally, because it's someone I play frisbee with, so I see him like maybe twice a year. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting, and I found it to be really cool. But Yeah, I mean, I have to imagine if you're not sleeping and just seeing the red all day, probably.
I
not
mean,
great.
that's why I stopped. Otherwise, I would probably still have it. My husband used it a lot. He also tried the Aura ring.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But he has a heart condition. So his heart rate variability is not normal. And so Whoop and Aura did not know how to register that.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it was always off for him. He stayed at like 1% recovered because his heart rate variability is different than like a normal person's.
Right. And they just rely so heavily on that.
It relies like 100% on heart rate variability, which is really cool if like you have a normal one. Like I have a normal heart rate variability. So like it read perfectly for me, but my problem was the sleep. But yeah, I mean, like, I wonder what it would be now with law school and stress.
Yeah, that's actually where I was going to go with that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I would imagine the stress would definitely trigger the Whoop and the heart rate variability. Because
yeah,
it is so stressful being in law school.
yeah. Well, what I've noticed is that when I like work a long day, like I won't even do that much. Like I'll because I use it mostly for this training because I had a habit of like overtraining and kind of just running myself into the ground. But I'll like do a lift or something and get to like 12 straight through that. And then through working, I'll get up to like 17, which like is odd for me. Just that like I guess my heart rate gets like escalated enough. Cause like I'm doing pretty active work when I'm doing stuff. It's not just like sitting there. It's like, I don't know, actually working on things like pretty mentally engaging. But I was just surprised. I was wondering like if law school work had the same impact, but
Oh, I would imagine so. I mean, it's super stressful. Like, cold calls, that'll get your heart
right.
rate up. Holy shit.
Yeah, how did cold calls go? Was that relatively okay?
As long as you do the reading, it's fine. But
Yeah.
there were a couple people in my class who like did not do the reading and you could tell. And the professor would be like, "Oh, did you actually read?" And like they would be like, "No, I didn't read the case." And she like, "See me after class,"
Yeah, not a great
which is
position.
never good.
I did
Yes.
hear one strategy, which might be totally BS because like I have no clue, but I heard like someone just said just prep for the final all semester and just disregard the cases. And you, like if you get cold called, it's not a big deal. And you'll just look stupid. But I think this was like out of school where it was 100%. I don't know. And I think maybe the finals included all the cases. I have no idea. I heard that, but it seems from your
That's
reaction that
terrible
was a bad
advice.
idea.
I don't know who told you that, but that is the worst advice I have ever heard.
Well, it was on Reddit, so it fits. But
I mean, if you don't read the cases, you don't know the law. So, the way our country works is we use the law from cases. And
right.
if you're going to be a lawyer and you're looking up stuff, you're reading cases. Like it's very similar to law school. Like you're still, like we still pull everything from case law. So
Yeah,
yeah,
good to
to
know.
say don't read, I don't know how somebody would study for the final if they hadn't read the cases. So like, I don't
Yeah.
know who told you that. That is insane. Do not, if you're listening to this podcast, do not do that in law
Yeah.
school.
Well, I think
Like,
the lesson from that is that I like to think of myself as a pretty critical, like able to figure out what's real and what's not. Even I hop on Reddit and I'm able to take totally terrible advice and think there might be some merit to it, which I find to be the case all the time on Reddit because everyone's just spewing on there. People just say all sorts of crap, and it could be valid, it could be invalid, but you really have no way of knowing because it's just some random account posting, and maybe
yeah,
they know what they're talking about. Maybe they're just saying don't read any of the cases; it'll go fine. And that's not true
yeah.
at all.
Do not. That is the worst advice I have ever heard. Everything in order to study for the final, you have to read the cases. Otherwise, you're not going to know what to study for the final, basically.
Yeah,
Like,
well, that's good to hear. I'm glad that it's bad advice. Well, I mean, I guess I'm not glad because I thought I knew like some hack, and I haven't been telling anyone this because I have no clue. I have no authority to tell anyone like how to do law school, but it sounds like that guy is totally full of it and incorrect. So
yeah, he
when
is
yeah,
very incorrect. Unless he's going to like some one-off school that like, I don't know. But
yeah,
all of
it,
my friends in law school, we all read the cases because that's how you get the law from like you know, like that's how you apply it. You have to learn the law in order to apply it, and applying it is the final. Like that's the whole basis of the final is
All right,
application.
cool. Yeah. And yeah, if you don't know the case, like how could you possibly like aggregate that? And then, yeah, I guess after thinking through it, it makes sense. I thought, I don't know. I was like tempted by it. I'm totally convinced that like you're correct. It's just, it's so funny that like I could so easily be convinced by something that's just so full of crap just because you don't know better. And I'm sure the same thing happens all the time with admissions and the LSAT more broadly. But for one final kind of legal question, do you know what you want to do job/career wise once you graduate, or is that still up in the air?
No, I'm
Medical
probably gonna,
malpractice.
I mean, I will probably do like a health law or med mal. I mean, I don't see that changing really. Unless I get into like something, you know, like if I take like my, because I'll have to take criminal law in the fall, you know, and unless like that's like something love, you know, maybe I would do that, but I don't foresee that. I'm definitely probably gonna do something health related in the legal world.
Yeah. Maybe you can be like the Frank Azar of the health law world.
God, Frank Azar.
Um, I actually think Frank Azar is an inspirational story. He went to DU and has created such a large firm. I mean, he's a Colorado lawyer, for those of you listening who have no clue what we're talking about, but he's like the personal injury guy of Colorado, and he's got the market pretty locked down. It's
Yeah.
And he has like, I don't know, I think he's amusing. I don't know that I would ever hire him, but he's a good time.
I don't think I would ever hire any of those guys that are like on like Hoiser and Hoiser. No, not happening.
When you really see it, like I think we're lucky in Colorado. We don't really have a lot of billboards and stuff, or at least I don't ever really see any. But I went to New Mexico and it's just like there's a personal injury lawyer every other billboard. It's just wild. So I guess if you are looking to personal injury, maybe New Mexico is the place to be. But yeah, I guess just to kind of wrap things up, do you have any final thoughts or things you want to leave folks with that are currently in the process of applying to law school and figuring out their legal future?
Take the LSAT before the games are taken away. Because the games are your friend. And yeah, I mean, get ready to apply at the beginning of application. Like as soon as admissions opens, I really think that that is super valid advice. I think waiting until the last minute is not going to help you. I have a friend who applied in June of like right before school was starting, and she got admitted like a week before, and it was like a scramble to like get everything ready. She, you know, like her books were delayed because she couldn't, like she had a week to get her stuff together, and I like highly do not recommend that. Like get your applications in, know where you're gonna go, like, you know, figure everything out before, so like the stress is not there, you know, like the first week of school, you're not like stressed getting your books and all that other stuff. That's my biggest advice. And like, you know, get help with your essays and stuff, because you may think you're a good writer, but you're really not.
Yeah, no one's a good writer. I mean, I even like fun fact, I guess I didn't mention this, but when I was writing my little LSAT introductory book, I actually had Malorie here like kind of look through some of the chapters because you miss things in your own writing, and you might think you're the best writer in the world, like you always do. You just,
I mean, I have written a million papers. Like being an English major, I got, you know, I did a like significant studies in like Shakespeare, you know, so I did a lot of British literature, and but like still I wanted you to look at it because, you know, like it's always just good to have a second set of eyes and have multiple iterations of it, right? Like I think I wrote like 2 different personal statements and finally decided on the one that I, you know, I think you helped me decide like what to write about, and, you know, what is, I don't know. Yeah, my personal statement was not fluffy at all.
Yeah, it was good. And like, was it a 99th percentile personal statement? Like in all transparency, probably not. But also it definitely wasn't a bad one. And I would probably put it like the 90th percentile for sure, which when you already are there numbers wise and you're just making sure you check the boxes, it's perfect. In fact, you probably don't want to take the risk to be a 99th percentile because it can also go the other way. And
no, it absolutely can. Like if you're you know, like if you're too good, they're going to be like, oh, well, she's just going to say no to our school, so we're not going to offer her anything, right? Like there's such a like weird admission, right? Like the whole game is just so weird, but that's
Yeah.
what it is. It's a game. And like, yeah, I mean, I'm just happy that I did what I did because it set me up for success, right? Like everything that I did, all the work I put into it, doing all the tutoring and like the admission stuff, it helped me be ready for September 1st. And I got those applications in and like I could breathe, you know, for a minute
Yeah. Well,
until
then you
like,
don't, yeah, you
like,
also don't second guess yourself, like what could have been if I had just done this right, because you did do it right. So you don't have those
yeah,
like doubts about,
exactly. Yeah. And then you can like take a little time off from like worrying about admissions. And then once you get all of your acceptances, you know, which I did, then the hard work, like, then it's like, oh shit, where am I going to go? You know, like now I've got too many options and
right?
which is never a bad thing, you know, right? Like I didn't get accepted to Yale or Harvard, but you know, I still had really good options. And yeah, I mean, that was a nice feeling to be like, okay, here's 12 schools that all want me. Like, how do I decide where I want to go?
Yeah, it's just such a good position to be in. Like you said, like I endorse everything you said. Basically, you just want to do everything right. So then when the time does come, you have good options instead of like just hoping that that final school accepts you instead of waitlists you. Because at that point, you've already lost. Like there's just nothing you can do.
Well, yeah. And like, stop complaining about the LSAT. Like, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I lost some sleep over that when the ABA started talking about it because like I don't know, I've put a lot. I'm 24, I could pivot, but I put a lot into doing the LSAT full time and other things. So I was a little worried, but the more I thought about it, the more I go, okay, we're fine. Like this isn't going anywhere. Law school still need to evaluate applicants.
Right.
Um,
You know, I mean, where else would they go? The GRE? Like, I just don't foresee them pivoting to
yeah.
the GRE.
Well,
You
several
know?
of the, I think 50 or 60 deans wrote an open letter to the ABA saying, hey, don't get rid of the LSAT. We need it. Or even if you do, we're going to keep using it. So,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
only schools that I think would get rid of
It's
it,
like the MCAT. Like the MCAT's not going anywhere.
it's technically the MCAT's not even required. Technically, they just require it though because they have to. Like they have to
Right.
evaluate somehow.
They
So
have to be able to weed the people out, right?
yeah,
Like they have to have some sort of filter. And that's
yeah,
it.
exactly. So I think the LSAT might evolve. Like things might change. They might change the test, but like they will never get rid of a test or some way to evaluate people. As
And if you
GPA
put in the
more subjective.
time, well, if it's like if you do the work to like get a decent score, I think a lot of people just like, you know, like we were talking about somebody else that I studied with, and like they just didn't want to do in the work to like get the score. But it's like if you like put in the time and effort, like just I don't know, just do
Yeah, and
it.
also
Like,
if you really do put in the time and the effort and you're still unable to get past like 155, 150, like I really worry about like how you're gonna then compete in future, I guess, academic
yeah,
competitions, which like law school kind of is in a way.
it
Um,
absolutely is. I mean,
so not
unless
to say
you
like
go to a school that doesn't have grades, right? Like then it's a
yeah,
little different, but yeah, I mean, it is definitely a competition because if you are below, right, like, because you have a curve in law school. So like they have to give a certain amount of low grades. Like that's just
yeah,
how it is. And if you're one of those people, then you're in trouble. So yeah, I don't know.
awesome. Well, I think it's been a lot of really good advice for folks. Hopefully they take it to heart and don't just shrug it off, as many do. As someone who gives a lot of advice, you see a lot of that. But if you've helped one person go to law school for free or something, then it's all good work. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much, Mallory.
Yeah, no problem.